at the alarming rise in burnout. So it's the UK's first index of its kind. So it's an interesting area. Let's get a bit of insight around this. Let's sort of see what the index says, and who better to give us an insight than Claire Neal, Head of Workspace Mental Health UK. Welcome to the show. Great to have you on board. So,
thanks, Jimmy.
Yeah, great to have you on board, Claire. Thank you for taking the time to come on board. This is a really important area for sure. Can you give us a bit of an insight into this sort of index?
Yeah, absolutely. So, against the rising backdrop of people out of work due to long-term sickness, Mental Health UK, which is the largest UK-wide mental health charity, decided to run a survey to get an understanding of people's perception of chronic stress and burnout in the workplace, and so that's what we did. The report is published today, and as you alluded to, it has had some quite alarming statistics, which I can give you some to start off with. So we know that about 20% of those who responded have taken time off work due to poor mental health caused by stress in the past year. We also know that nearly 50% of employees don't feel that their employer has a plan in place to spot signs of chronic stress and to prevent burnout. So those are some of the areas we want to focus on to engage with workplaces to ensure they're taking steps to stop this alarming trend.
No, it's really interesting, and I mean, I'm an advocate, Claire, for mental health, and I can appreciate obviously that that obviously there's a lot of variables involved and in people's sort of mental health. So before we sort of touch on like some of the findings and sort of what could potentially be done, there's the other side to it too, I think, and there's the argument that the other side to the argument is going to be, for a lot of people, is it society? Is it an issue around society in terms of the way the resilience of society? I mean, for example, things have always been tough. I mean, there's probably going to be listeners listening in who may have experienced, the Second World War, the Blitz, for example, and that obviously this brings a different type of stress. And I mean, is it a case where, a lot of people are going to be thinking that maybe people's resilience is sort of diminishing? I mean, I used to look at this country, Great Britain, from far afield and sort of think, okay, admire the resilience of people in this country, the sort of the backbone, but now, there's kind of a shift in terms of, people talking about, how, and look, I'm sure they are stressed and other stuff, but there's countries around the world that people are working for £1 a day for 14, 15 hours. And I mean, what's your take on people who are going to have that sort of view? Where do we go? I mean, what's the findings? What can back up these sort of findings?
Yeah, and it's a really important conversation to have. And yes, we do hear people who talk about using mental health as an excuse, for example, but this isn't a new issue. People have always, used mental health or flu or back pain as an excuse for not being able to cope with the pressures of work. But this shouldn't overshadow the fact that there are many people struggling with high levels of stress in the work. And we do know as well that what has changed for the better is that people are more willing to open up and talk about their mental health. So perhaps in the past, older generations had this stiff upper lip attitude. So it wasn't a case of we didn't have this problem back in the day, but rather we weren't allowed to talk about it. So on the positive, we do see this fostering of a more mentally healthy culture at work, where it is now more acceptable to talk about it. And if you talk about it, that's when you can get help, and you can do that before things start to significantly impact your kind of longer term mental health and your physical health. So I think when people call that people need to be more resilient, I would encourage us to be more curious than dismissive when somebody flags that their mental health is struggling.
No, absolutely, and I think that's important. We know that early intervention is gets better results for people as well. The earlier they can get the right professional help, then the better chance they've got of making a recovery and better. And absolutely, if anyone's sort of struggling, there are a number of options for them. Whether it's probably outside the scope of this conversation, but whether they sort of check into A&E if it's a crisis, or 111, or there's a lot of support lines in the UK as well, which is sort of a lot of support lines that I'm not sure if you can mention some of them to our listeners, Claire, at some point. But yeah, I mean, there is that's for sure. And I think that, and the reason I sort of spoke about that too, Claire, is to sort of create a balanced view of it. I think you've made a good point there. Maybe in the past, the stigma attached with mental health, which still is around now, by the way. But I suppose with everything in life, Claire, there are going to be people, unfortunately, that are going to use it. A spade's a spade, in my view, and I'm sure there are going to be people who are going to use it. But for everyone who does that, I'm sure there's a lot of people who aren't going to use it, who do need the help. And do you think that's a sort of fair assessment, that we can't work on the basis that there are people that might use it, like say they've got a flu or a cold, and use it as an excuse, but we have to sort of take everyone seriously if they do report mental health?
Yeah, absolutely, and also to those people, because of course there are still people who do who do struggle to understand the issue of mental health at work. But to those people, what I would say, it's not, healthy workplaces are more productive, so it's not just an ethical issue, and nice to have, looking after the mental health of your staff. It really makes good business sense, because if you don't look after the mental health of your staff and they go off on short-term or long-term sick, it has a knock-on effect to those people who are still in the workplace when it comes to workload, and then it costs businesses a lot of money. So to those people who aren't quite there yet, I would say, well, look at the business case too. Hello?
Sorry, Claire. Sorry, it just faded out a little bit there. Can you hear me? Yeah. No, absolutely. So there is the business element as well, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. It makes good financial sense to look after the mental health of your workforce.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing with that sort of, Claire, apologies to our listeners, kind of just faded away a little bit there, but I suppose the other concern is going to be with that is going to be, like you said, you made a really good point there. There is a financial side of things, there obviously the ethical side of things too. But then, is there a danger that some workplaces, Claire, are going to just use as a box-ticking exercise? So we've got this in place, and sort of that. My suspicions are there might be some organisations that could just do it as a box-ticking exercise rather than sort of commit themselves 100% towards giving the employers the best possible chance to go into the environment where they can flourish.
You're absolutely right. There's always that danger that it is going to be a tick in the box exercise. And when we work with organisations, which we do day in, day out, the focus on fostering a culture change, it's got to be a top-down approach to supporting good mental health in the workplace that consists of senior leadership fostering this culture where staff feel able to discuss their well-being. We talk a lot about the importance of supportive line managers, so getting line managers trained up in how to have conversations, supportive conversations about mental health, to understand their duty of care when it comes to checking in on their team, following up for anyone who might be struggling, and signposting them to support that exists in the workplace. So a lot of organisations have employee assistance programs in place, as an example. So those are 24-hour free helplines with access to counsellors, and so being able to send people to those is another way that a manager can support anyone in their team that might be struggling.
Absolutely, and just on that sort of, Claire, you've made some really, really great points there, and I think for our listeners it's really informative. Like going into more detail, if anyone's listening, like that is an employer or a manager or in a decision-making role, what can they do? I know there's no two places the same, and I'm not suggesting to give anyone any advice, anything, but what steps can they take to make it a more friendlier place for burnout? Obviously, we've seen the figures, and the importance of sort of getting the right help, and you mentioned there like the counselling options available to some places as well. What steps can people take to have that in place, and what can they have in place to help staff?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are several things. I've talked about the training, really, really important, because it opens up the confidence for people to have these supportive conversations. When senior leaders and line managers role model healthy behaviour, that can set a fantastic precedent for everybody else in the workforce, that it's okay to look after yourself at work. So, people should be taking their lunch breaks. I mean, things that should be obvious, but unfortunately now people don't take these breaks that they should do to allow them to recharge and refresh in order to go back to the next piece of work with a bit more energy and vigour. We encourage people to make sure they use their annual leave wisely, so don't sort of slog yourself until you're feeling burnt out and then take a 2-week holiday. Use your annual leave wisely and use it. So we do hear stories of people sending emails in their holidays, and it sends a very negative message to anybody else in the organisation. You need to set a precedent of how we do things, and senior leadership need to let the workforce know that isn't acceptable, and that they need their people to be well, and self-care isn't a nice to have, it's an absolutely essential thing to have.
Absolutely. And just on that sort of, you mentioned those counselling lines, I mean, I don't know if this is outside the scope of our discussion. Where can like companies kind of, if they haven't already accessed that, what can they do to sort of maybe, because that for me sounds like a great idea, having like that counselling service available. Is there anything? How does that work, Claire?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll give you a couple of resources. So employee assistance programs are services that organisations can buy, and they give, as I say, free counselling to individuals, and it's completely confidential. So there is a website called eapa.org that gives you all the providers. So that's one thing that organisations can think about. I'd also encourage anyone who wants to take steps to improve the mental health of their workforce to look at the Mental Health UK website. So we have a lot of resources available, from how to have mentally healthy conversations to understanding more about burnout and what to do to address it. And also lots of information about our mental health awareness training, which, as I said at the beginning, is really, really important as a first step to open up the conversation around mental health. And our website, if I could share it,
absolutely,
is it's www.mentalhealth-uk.org.
Absolutely, I'll share that as well when I share the show as well. I think that's really interesting and really, really important. I think that's sort of, I suppose, another conversation for another day. I mean, in my opinion, I think generally speaking, anecdotally, there is still a poor understanding of mental health amongst a lot of people, not just in organisations, but generally speaking, really, it would sort of, and I think that, I suppose it's a bit of a minefield for people in terms of, understanding the complexity of mental health as well. Sometimes, people kind of, mistake mental health with, say, performance, particularly in sort of high-performing environments, if that makes any sense. But that's another story for another day. But it's been really interesting speaking to you, Claire. I think it's really interesting and informative. I'll definitely sort of check out the website and certainly sort of share it and sort of people can, access it and make their own mind up, really, and go from there. But thanks again for your time. It's been great of you to join us. And have a fantastic day. Thank you.
Thanks, Jimmy. Thank you.